Hello there, I'm James.
And I am Emme.
And welcome back to the Bestiary, Monster Manual A to Z. This week, Emme, what in the holy hell are we talking about?
What in the holy hell indeed? It's the Death Knight. Good.
It's the Death Knight.
God, Gertrude.
It's one of the most awesome things in the Monster Manual, in my opinion.
This is literally metal. Look at this thing. Look at it.
Yeah, let's start with the art. Those burning red eyes, skeletal hands, that sort of ancient, almost sort of, I kind of feel like Middle Eastern-inspired armor style.
I could absolutely see some of that in there with the geometric patterns all across. It's very ornate. You get the sense that this was a person who, when they were alive, lived a very rich and ornate and detailed life. A lot of them is hidden, which I think is very interesting, especially considering the complicated nature of this monster. It really leads to a lot of customization. I think it really, even just in the art, implies that there are a lot of liberties to be taken with who this person was, because describing a Death Knight it is impossible to fight one unless you knew who they were and what they did when they were alive. So having this mystery of what's inside, what's underneath, that's the whole point of fighting one, and it's portrayed so well here in the art.
And I think, I'm pretty sure, in fact, that this picture that you get in the Monster Manual is, in fact, the OG Death Knight, the one that inspired the whole type of monster, Lord Soth. Now, if you don't know this guy, he's originally from the Dragonlance novels. The character itself was created by Tracy Hickman and Margaret Weiss, who basically needed this big bad evil guy for the heroes to fight in the Dragonlance setting, and, was a noble knight in life, but essentially, a paladin that fell from grace, ended up leaving his wife for an elf maiden he fell in love with and then had a son with, but ended up, I'm skipping a lot of detail here, but ended up basically causing their death in a burning castle, collapsing in on them, and then for his sins he was punished by the dark powers to eternally exist in undeath and relive his sins, unable to die or find peace. He is an awesome character, and one of very few examples, in fact, from of a character being originally a literary character that's then imported into D&D, because not in the current 5th edition, but in previous versions of the Ravenloft setting, Lord Soth is a bad guy there.
Yeah, this guy, he's got a lot of story. He's a really good example for if you are making your own Death Knight, that's the bar. That's how detailed this creature needs to be. This guy reeks of big bad evil guy. He is absolutely something you see towards the end, and because of that, that mythology is so deep. So the way this is written here, there's a lot of holes I was noticing in the way these guys are written, and that, again, that's just more hints that as a DM you need to be looking at how this guy is built, what's his story. But the big basics of it is that this was a paladin. This was a paladin who not just broke their oath, broke it spectacularly. Absolutely broke every promise they made to their god, and beyond that, desecrated what they stood for in a particularly meaningful and deep fashion, and they cannot rest nor be killed until that sin has been redeemed. Whew.
Yeah, which is why you can't just throw one of these at your players and be like, oh yeah, it's a Death Knight. This has to be a fully fleshed out character in their own right. As you say, big bad evil guy material, 100%.
Yeah, because in order to beat this guy, you have to know who he is.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't just kill him. You have to help him.
Yeah,
that's
because
the only
he's
way
never actually going to be gone until they are redeemed. And considering, this guy has not just fallen from grace, but plummeted, you're going to have to do a lot in order for this creature to be redeemed and therefore actually killable.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I think there's again all these gaps. So looking down here at the stats, I kept looking for, okay, it says that he's going to keep resurrecting until he's been redeemed. How often? When? If you knock him down, does he just immediately stand back up, or does it take a couple of days?
How long does it take? I mean, are we talking like days, weeks, centuries?
It's not like a lich where he's got a phylactery. So
No.
there's so much room for improvisation. And does he know that he needs to be redeemed in order to be destroyed? Does he want to be destroyed? Does he want that redemption? Do you have to actively help him and walk up to him and be like, hey, neither of us want to be anymore. Here's how we're going to help you. Or does he revel in it? Does he lack that anymore because his alignment has changed? The suggestion, of course, you could play with this. The suggestion here is to make these guys chaotic evil. It's the exact opposite of the paladin, so that makes a sort of sense. But there's so much room. Looking down here at this guy, he's got insanely high stats. He's immune to a whole bunch of conditions. He's immune to necrotic and poison, which make both make sense. He's a challenge rating 17. He's a 19th level caster. His DC is 18. He's insane. He's got this Hellfire Orb. Guys, have you seen this Hellfire Orb? It's way worse Fireball. It catches on things. It does necrotic damage. It's insane. But again, he's got all these paladin spells as well, which really leads into the lore. But there's so many places for improvisation as a DM and as a player that excites me so much. For example, here he speaks, I know this was something I was looking at, he speaks Abyssal, and it's suggested he's chaotic, which this particular base entry makes me think that this guy, the mysterious dark power that turned him might have been demonic or Abyssal. But that's a mystery too. What dark power is influencing this?
Yeah, and this is partly why, honestly, these guys are like in my top 5 of like everything in here. Not only are they inspired by such an awesome character, and guys, if you haven't checked out the Dragonlance books, you absolutely should. Any fan of fantasy of any kind should at least give them a cursory read. But yeah, there's so much potential. You know, you've got what you have here in the book, but as you say, so much customization. If you've got Lord Soth as a benchmark, but you can play with this as a DM, especially if it's your big bad evil guy. Make them your own. You know, you say, because like with the plate and shield, you've got an armor class of 20. You know, do you want to respec him, sort of? Because, you know, he's got a 20 strength, 20 constitution as well. Do you want to respec this guy into more of like a dex-based fighter? Like, depending on your setting, like, do you make, you know, like a Death Knight that's more of like a Death Samurai sort of thing? Like, it's so much that you can do with this.
Who was this person when they were alive? What changed them into? And that's another thing that I almost immediately considered was, okay, something caught this sin, caught this life force and turned it into a Death Knight. It doesn't just happen on its own. Something transforms them. What if this is your second next bad guy? What if there's the thing that's right behind him is even worse?
Yeah.
Blech. It's so awful. These guys are so cool. And especially as a player looking at this, the other thing that I know, if you've been around D&D long enough, if you have DM'd at some point, even as a player, you've looked in the monster manual and you don't want to meta, you don't want to go through, you want to have that fresh discovery for your character that trolls need to be killed with fire every single time. And with this guy, because he's so open-ended, as a player, you know you're going to get a fresh experience when you see one of these. You know you're getting a slice of what the DM was imagining for this world because of those inherent holes in this story, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, and, you know, let's think of, again, how many other characters in fiction have this sort of similar, you know, tragic origin from such a noble background. I mean, like, one that leaps to mind for me, one of my favorite characters of all time, Darth Vader. Like, Darth Vader is essentially what you're looking at here. And again, this tragic, classic storytelling device that creates such a compelling villain and such an interesting experience for DMs and players, if you do it right.
And a villain makes the story. Let's be real. When you're looking at a big arc, it's the villain that makes the story. There's a reason that we think of people like Darth Vader as being so incredibly iconic. And the other thing that I think is very interesting about characters that you can relate to this Death Knight character with these tragic backgrounds is they're also cautionary. So a paladin is it's a playable class. It's a class that I think a lot of people, I think, have an interesting time with. I'm reluctant to say difficult, but an interesting time with, because this is a thing that could happen to you. You have an oath. You owe someone. You have to live your life that way, regardless of what the world or the other player characters or even your own wants are. This is what you have to do, because these are the consequences.
Yeah, and I think there is a tendency, and, you know, this isn't me trying to sort of get up on any kind of high horse, like, it's completely understandable, this is a game, after all, that players sometimes, and DMs are guilty of this as well, will look at classes like paladins, like warlocks, you know, even like things like sorcerers to an extent, where you think, oh yeah, cool, so like I can do this, but I also get these cool powers from this source, cool. And some people, I think, forget that, well, that comes with strings attached. And for the paladin, if you break that oath, of course, it's as 5th edition sets it up, it's not necessarily that a paladin is tied to a god, it's more of like a set of ideals that might be represented by a particular god, but doesn't have to be. And yeah, if you go at any point kind of super hard against those ideals and break that oath or betray the trust of that deity, you're going to get sothed.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I think that it's something that really makes the world big. It makes it interesting. It's part of why I think people really enjoy the stories behind D&D, and that's ultimately why we're here, is because of the stories.
Choice and consequence.
Thank you so much for joining us this week on The Bestiary. Have you ever had a mental tussle with a Death Knight? Please tell us about it down in the comments. I would really love to hear the tale of your encounter with this really awesome entry to the Monster Manual. Please, while you're there, hit subscribe and hit that bell. It really does help us out. Hit that like button. And here's some more videos you can watch with us, and join us next week when we talk about the Demi-Lich.
Oh, the Demi-Lich.
Oh boy.